We are live. What's up, good people? Hopefully you are doing well out there in the world. Welcome back to this channel and welcome to today's discussion on why anarchy doesn't exist the way you think. And I'm super duper excited. So first, I want to say that it is a very, very, very good day for you to be at this YouTube channel and experience this experience that you're about to go on. As you know, my second book, The Inner Storyteller, is ready for pre-order. Just go to the link tree, and it's the first link that you'll see to get your copy. To secure the price. To secure the price that is the price today, because as soon as it launches, outside of pre-order, that price is going to shoot up a little bit. Also, like and subscribe, do the whole YouTube algorithm help. And today, I have an opening for you, and then I'm going to bring in a very, very special guest. So get your mind ready for the opening, and here we go. We are at a university seminar in Professor Burns' class that he calls artistic language. Professor Burns opens up and says, "Welcome everyone to artistic language," and immediately is interrupted by one of the students who asks, "Professor Burns, don't you mean language arts?" "No," he says. "Language arts merely teaches you how to use language, whereas here in artistic language, we examine what language does to you. More precisely, we examine the ontological architecture of meaning." Professor Burns begins writing on the board. Let's begin with something simple. He writes visible/invisible. Then he writes satisfied/unsatisfied. Grateful, ungrateful. Changing, unchanging. These are clean binaries, linguistic mirrors of conceptual contrasts. Would anyone else like to contribute to my list? The first student raises his hand. Afraid and unafraid. Yes, as he writes that answer down. Fear and its negation. Next. Moved and unmoved? Perfect. A good distinction of response to phenomenon. Let's get one more. Flammable and inflammable. Ah, yes. I was hoping someone would say that. At first glance, we would all assume that we found another opposition. But flammable and inflammable mean the exact same thing. Then he erases the board and writes form-opposition-substance-equivalence and begins to explain today's lesson. So we are faced with something interesting. A linguistic structure that appears to signal opposition but collapses into equivalence somehow. Professor Burns turns back toward the class. Now tell me, did the words themselves deceive you, or did your mind complete a pattern that it was used to? We have a symbol in the prefix, which creates an expectation connected to an assumed meaning, he says. You saw the prefix in your mind. Before you cognized its meaning, you assumed it due to the negation in the same prefix in other words on this list. You assigned opposition to something that means the same thing. But none of that came from a verification. It came from interpretation. And to expand on this is not a failure of language itself. It's merely a feature of perception, he says. Because the mind does not wait for certainty, and it prefers coherence. So when it encounters a familiar structure, it fills in the meaning before checking if the meaning is actually there. We do this beyond language as well. When something appears to be structured in opposition, we often assume that opposition is real, not because we've actually examined it, but because the symbol suggests it. And sometimes that assumption is correct, sometimes it isn't. But the mechanism in the mind is always the same. The appearance of opposition shapes the interpretation before the substance is ever examined. Now let's return to flammable and inflammable and take a philosophical stab at why these words are not opposites. I say it's because a flame is not an object and therefore doesn't have an objective opposite. Not in the traditional sense. It's a process, a continuous event of transformation in a fixed point. So what's the opposite of a flame? Well, it wouldn't be non-flame, as that's just the absence of it. Opposites work very cleanly with things, but they begin to fail with processes. You see, a flame has presence without performance. It has a form without an identity. It has continuity without stability. Very similar to the human body and its cells. It does not oppose something. It either emerges and sustains under the right conditions, or it does not. So, now we have two layers of insight. The first being that a structure can look like opposition when in fact it is equivalent in substance to something else. And the second layer is some things are not structured into opposites at all because they aren't things. They have more of a freedom than merely binary existence. So perhaps the problem isn't that flammable and inflammable mean the same thing when they have the appearance of looking opposed. Perhaps the problem is how quickly we assume our initial conclusions to be correct based on symbols that have pre-programmed meaning in our mind conditioned by society. And if that assumption goes unexamined, you don't just misunderstand words, you see. You misunderstand what you're looking at. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the opening of this awesome show we have planned for you today. And I say we because I have invited a super, very awesome guest to come speak with me and you today about something that he has not only been studying, okay, but has been actively bringing people like me and you, viewers out there, together to do the work that brings the changes we want to see in the world and within ourselves. Today, we will be discussing exactly how symbols, stories, and distractions contribute to our collective assumptions about freedom, slavery, government, and morality, which may not be correct. Cory, welcome to the channel, brother. Can't hear you?
Hello. I'm not on the screen, my brother, but I appreciate it. I think everybody can hear me. There we go. How's it going? Glad to be on here. You do such amazing work. What an incredible opening. I love how academic it is, as my work aims to be more and more academic moving forward, showing historical examples, psychological examples, and so forth, to basically show what reality we might be living under. And I say might because I want people to ask questions. I want them to determine it for themselves. I think you might share the same goal as me, is that we're not trying to really push for a certain agenda or prove anything. If anything, rather, we want to disprove or unveil, have the truth reveal itself. And that's going to be a process. It's not going to be an instantaneous thing. It's not going to be a mandate. It's not going to be some declaration. It's going to be perhaps an ever evolving process that requires the audience and all of us to participate in it together. So thank you very much. unmute. Unmute yourself, brother. You're good. You're good.
There we go. Yes, I'm still learning this hosting thing for sure. But I appreciate the compliments, and I'm very, very excited by what you said because you don't know the notes that I have in front of me for today's show. You just know the truth. I regard you as somebody who knows the truth personally, and I feel like your work speaks for itself. So before we even get into the notes that I have, please give the synopsis of what you are about. Meaning, you like Cory's core, right?
Right.
Give us the Cory's core and a little bit about the awesome things people can tap into when they connect with you if they value similar things to us.
Well, I appreciate that. Yes, I am working on all fronts, both online and in person, to do what I can to basically better our world. I think a lot of people feel that the world is going basically down the drain in various ways. There's a billion different things to talk about in regards to what could be fixed and what could be made better. And I'll even speak to people on the street and I say, how do we make the world better? And they're like, where do I start? Right? They have actually a lot of ideas that they wish were manifest in the world. And they wonder just as much as me, why isn't that? And maybe they believe that the world is asleep, or maybe that they believe that people are waking up per se. These are the things they say to me in the terminology that is used. And others may say, oh, well, it's hopeless and, there's nothing we can do. And some others might want to say, I want to live off grid and go to the countryside and away from the rest of society. Others that are crazy enough, like me, might say, I want to go towards society and see if I can free and help as many people as I can. And I'm not a moral crusader trying to say I have the moral high ground and I understand these things better than everybody else. If anything, I look toward the average person. That's why I talk to them on the street and I see their immense value. I see the beauty in them. And I see that when they just express being human to me. Because one thing I think a lot of people can agree with when it comes to the world and what has been increasingly happening, and it has happened for many thousands of years, is we could be trained like robots. We could be acting as robots or putting on a mask, not being authentic, not being who we want to be, not living the life we want to truly live. And so people feel that through numerous ways, and it also manifests in the health realm, right? People end up with all sorts of diseases and they live their whole life. They have ego death experiences, tons of things that I sit down, I talk to these people, and my mind is just blown by what people go through, average, everyday people, and how much wisdom they have too. So part of my work is really tapping into you and what you currently believe and your current mindset, and asking you questions, seeing if there's perhaps any contradictions, any hypocrisies, and I am included within that. There might be things within myself that I don't see, just as there might be things in yourself that you don't see. And we have to help each other navigate that by helping each other, coaching. This is health coaching, this is supportive guidance, mentorship, stewardship, just like we would with a plant. If we were growing it in nature, we'd watch it, we'd give it time, we'd water it every so now and then, but it's not a fast process. And sometimes it could be really hard work, and sometimes you're going to make mistakes, but as long as we're there for each other, it will be rewarding. And so I've come to that through my projects, and I encourage other people to do the same thing. So I have created a nonprofit called Bigfoot Nature Fellowship, and I run several other websites and projects like Health Revealed, The Liberator 2 News, Nature is the Answer, which is a movement website. And I'm trying to actively work with many different people on all sorts of fronts. So Health Revealed is obviously about health, but it's also the biggest project in the world, I believe, on the psychology of authoritarianism. We gathered hundreds of materials over a span of years. We put it together into a seminar, which can then be decimated into many different works. And then we are now inviting health practitioners and challenging current psychologists to look at this material that mainstream psychology seems to not really look at. And a lot of my work seems to just point out these particular things where I'm like, how come we're not looking at this? How come we're not asking this question? And sometimes they're really obvious questions. Like when it comes to growing food for my local 5-acre project, Bigfoot Food Forest, we're proposing the idea that instead of growing lawns, we can grow food. But so many people grow lawns and it's like normal everyday life, even though that stems from royalty. And many Americans don't even know that. It's a status symbol, but it's not producing any valuable assets. All the churches, all the prisons, the schools, the parks, they have all this open land. And they're poisoning, actually, the kids that are playing in these parks and playgrounds because they're spraying poisons on them when they could be growing food, bringing community together, providing an asset that creates local bartering networks, helps provide natural medicine right there in your front door. I mean, there's so much potential. And that's just one thing, right? But then you look at everything else in our society, you're like, what else is there that's right in front of us that we don't see? And why do we not see it? Is it because we're consumed, we're distracted, and all the things that are going on rising to the surface? Is it because we're in our own head and we're often looking at all these things and we can't seem to get present with ourselves and really become aware? What is the real problem going on? So it's multifaceted and it's very nuanced, and that's why I write books about it. That's why I do a lot of seminars about it. But I like to approach things depending on the topic and depending on the environment, the person. I like to get very personal with it, just like I would in health coaching. What are you feeling? What do you think? And so if anybody right now in this live stream has any questions, any comments, I encourage them to share it. I like to be very interactive with these types of things. And so I appreciate you being here with me. And as we can create this conversation, we can get deeper into maybe some of the projects that I have created for this conversation.
Abso-freaking-lutely. So, boom. The topic of today is why anarchism does not really exist. And of course, the concept exists. Of course, a lot of ideas exist about anarchism or anarchy. But what is not often explained to people in school, people who are going to public, institutionalized learning places, is that the natural state of statism versus anarchy is anarchy. The one that you have to superimpose onto reality is statism, or monarchy, whatever. The one that you have to superimpose is rulership and subjects. The one that exists without anything being superimposed on reality is in fact anarchy. And we'll get into the prefix "an" and archon and things like that a little down the line. But let me start with something super simple. You woke up today, dear viewers. You woke up today. No one told you you had to wake up right then. Not in the real sense where it comes with the threat of violence or coercion, right? No one told you you have to breathe now. No one gave you permission to walk into your kitchen. No one gave you a license to think your thoughts. And yet you did all of it, freely, without question, and without the thought of I need permission. And so here's the question that I have, my first question. If we really live most of our lives without being controlled, why are we so convinced that control is necessary for society to function? Why do we need regulators? Cory?
We need regulators because we believe that humans are evil, nasty people who are going to go around hurting others. But then we ask ourselves, well, who are we electing? And we say they're human beings. So we must then presume that the people that we are putting in these positions of power are a better kind of human, maybe the best of us, we put in these positions so they can help govern or control or help manage the rest of the population. And there is this presupposed logic that we are just kind of born into that not only are humans inherently evil, whether it comes from even religious traditions sometimes teach this, but that humans need to be managed, otherwise they'll be chaotic beasts, right? And that the state of anarchy is chaos. Now, I'll leave it to you to actually break down the term anarchy, as you said. So we won't get to that point yet. But the idea of government is something that I trace back to the origins of Sumeria 6,000 years ago with the origins of slavery. systemically, as we can take note of, this is mainstream history. This is not me coming up with my own theories. Anybody can find this out for themselves. And every ancient civilization practiced slavery since, all under various different types of rulership, monarchy, even republics. Back in ancient Rome, it was very direct. If you wanted someone, you'd vote for them, you'd talk about it. There would be all these public settings, more direct than we have it here in America. And people believe this was the source of order. But undeniably, as we see with the term democide, government is among the top sources of chaos in our world. So then it's the matter of, well, okay, we looked at World War II, we looked at the patterns of history. Is it more of a source of protection, or is it more of a source of evil in our world? And let's ask the question as well, is it even true? Is it even moral? Right? Because if we would do the same thing with slavery, we can say, well, there's a lot of benefits to slavery, but also there might be benefits without slavery. It's not really in the conversation. Is it actually true? Is it actually moral? The abolitionists in America shifted that conversation. They didn't say, well, humans are bad. This is never going to work. And without this and without that, they were like, well, it's not moral. It's not right. So all our concerns don't really matter at the end of the day. Like, they do matter. Like, we do want to talk about them. People wrote extensive texts about it, and people do, for anarchism, actually, philosophical anarchism, not the people who are out on the streets with masks, throwing fire in the streets, but the tradition.
We're gonna get to them too.
The tradition going back to the 1850s, right, or 1840s, even beyond that, going back to ancient China and so forth, as I've detailed with Taoist philosophy. These are not chaotic people. These are people trying to figure out, well, what is the true reality? What is the truth? And maybe if we didn't fear people so much in their nature of having some good and having some bad, being potentially programmable depending on their circumstance, their environment, and much else, um, why do we want to say that we can fix people? Why do we want to say that we have to go in and manage society? What is that type of mindset? And who wants to do that? Does average people want to do that? Do good people want to do that? And do we see that good people end up in these positions of power? Right? These are when things start to shift. Do we see where someone gets this idea of the right to rule? Well, I said it originated in Sumeria with priest kings, slavery, where this divine right, it's like, oh, God gave me this. And then over time, that started to get challenged here in America. We said, oh, the monarchy, they don't have this right, so we should shift to maybe presidents and ministers. Why did we do that? Unless we presuppose something is more true than the other. Not that it works better, but that it's actually more true. They said it's founded by God, that it's founded in the universe and nature. It says that in the Declaration of Independence. They didn't say, well, we freed ourselves from Britain because we know it's going to work better, our system. They said, no, we freed ourselves because we know this is what we're born with. We're born with equal rights. We're born with freedom. So that makes a very big claim. It's like claiming to know what our reality is. And that's something that takes time. It's something that's like, we can make a lot of mistakes and say, well, I thought this process was perfectly fine and moral, but it actually wasn't. Like witch trials, right? Burning witches at the stake.
Right. So, okay. I'm noticing too, you're like a firecracker, so it's a little bit of a risk for me to try to stick to my notes here, but that doesn't mean you're doing it. I'm so enjoying this right now, and I'm 100% behind everything that you said. By the way, audience out there, I have a very need to a fixer-upper setup here, so I have to mute myself when Cory's talking, or his voice will echo through my microphone, and I wasn't able to sort that out beforehand. So I apologize to you. You guys deserve better, but you're gonna get something super great here. And let's continue down this path. So, yes, when people hear the word anarchism, first things that may come to their mind, especially if they are very academic with their demeanor, is violence, collapse, no rules. But that's not anarchism, as you pointed out. Not necessarily, but that is a repeated narrative, aka story, about anarchism. And if there's one thing that I really want to make clear to everyone, especially in my recent work, The Inner Storyteller, it's that human beings don't respond directly to reality. Human beings respond to the story we believe that reality belongs to. And what I mean is, inside every human being, there's something interpreting and assigning meaning to absolutely everything we go through. Every event, every fear, every belief of what's possible, every moment. And I call that force the inner storyteller. It's the part of you that decides this is safe, this is dangerous, they don't like me, I like this. This is how the world works. This is how the world doesn't work. This is how science doesn't work. That meaning comes from the stories that we adopt. So, Cory, what are your initial thoughts on this, the inner storyteller concept, and perhaps its role in our misunderstandings of freedom and anarchy?
Absolutely, very important. The stories that we tell ourselves will determine our reality for sure. And I say that because even the heart moves the world much more than the mind. And a lot of people follow biblical texts, for instance, which are story based. And it's part of the reason why people in scientific fields have such a hard time kind of going through it. It's because it's like, oh, well, it's a story. You know, this person said this. And without the context of one part, you kind of miss the other part. And so you need to like read the whole thing. And then if you forget this, you got to like go back and quote it. So, but we live our lives as a story, from the very minute we're born. And we have these different experiences happen to us. And then we have bad experiences. So we try to avoid those experiences. And then we try to learn and do better so we can have a better story for the rest of the story, right? Try to have a good ending, generally speaking, just like we would see in a movie. But sometimes it's not always a good ending, as we might know, as we might experience other people's stories or hear their stories. So we try to tell ourselves, well, maybe I can make my story a little bit different. Maybe I can change the story to make it more suitable for living on this earth, which can be sometimes very harsh. And that harsh reality, as we faced for many thousands of years, brought a lot of stories into people. I would say stories of trauma, stories of war, of conflict. And that's not a good story to keep, to really have if you really want to move forward and say, I'm much more than this. And that doesn't have to be my story. But we tell ourselves, well, this is the story, and this is the story I have to live, right? It's like I go to school, I go to college, I get a job, I work, I maybe get sick, and then I die. It's like I get married, I have to buy a house, and along with all of that, by the way, I have to pay taxes, I have to get permits and permission and licenses, I have to do everything that everyone else's story does, because that is the story. I am not my own story. I'm not an original book. I'm living something that isn't my story. It's not really creative. It's missing the soul. It's missing that intuition. And so people feel that, like I said, it's sterile. It's robotic. If you're just a script following everyone else, even the word robot comes from the word rabu, which means slave. And it's not a coincidence that when people are working 9 to 5 jobs and they say, I'm grinding, I'm slave grinding, and this is, they even call it wage slavery, that people feel like they are like robots. And so this is not sustaining for humankind. And it would be much more exciting of a story to say, man, I've gone on an adventure. I went across the world. I traveled on the ocean. I got to see this. I got to see that. But people can't live their lives because they feel trapped, as if their story is waiting to be unveiled, waiting to be opened, waiting to be written, but they never get the chance to write it. They never get the chance to actually sit down and read it or experience it. And so I think we have a great duty, which is to help people see their own story, their own value, their own purpose, and their own direction. And that's what determines the story, right? If you're writing a story, you say, well, I want to create something about this character and then this happens to them, or this, or you want to flow with it and you want to let things go. You don't have all these predetermined rules that say you have to go here, you have to do that. You have a guideline for yourself, but you want to do it. It's a purpose, it's a passion. But most people, I would say, in our world don't get to really live by that passion, that purpose. So again, you see this in health. There's something called logotherapy, where you follow your purpose. And that actually is healing so many people to find out, well, what is my purpose, right? It's not about, and again, this is going to now go into the realm of like, is there such a thing as a true purpose? Is there a true purpose maybe to our whole reality? Now, if we're talking about anarchy and freedom, we're not just talking about one person's purpose or one person's story. We're talking about the story of mankind, from superstition to reality.
Yeah,
And Frederick
I always,
Bastiat, if you're aware of his work, he said that superstition would be toward the origins of human history. So I would believe the same thing based on the mainstream history that we have been told, that as we evolve, we would understand, or maybe we're just returning back to what we once were. It's a whole separate conversation, but getting away from superstition, getting more to clarity.
very good answer. And yeah, and I was just gonna say right then that I always prioritize shared objectives
Mm-hmm.
over purpose, or over true purpose for the individual, if you
Right.
will. So let's I've loved your answer, by the way, your whole answer. Let's strip this down a little bit, and you are right in line with these notes somehow magically. So anarchy, anarchism as the thing that we're living by, right? It's not something that you build. It's something that you strip the layers of falsehood off of, like an onion, and you arrive at the natural state, which we can call anarchy, but calling it anarchy as a thing is trying to call non-flame a thing, right? From my intro, the flame is a thing. We can see it. If we put our hand over it, it burns. Non-flame is not really a thing, but we can use non-flame to look at like nature, the baseline, the foundation. So it's not something that you vote into existence. It's not something that begins after the system collapses. It's already the default. It's already every non-enforced moment of anybody's life. Right now, Cory is not being forced to sit there to listen and talk with me. We're not being controlled moment to moment. All the time, all the people, most of the time, are doing anarchy all day long. Why? Well, because something deeper is guiding behavior, and it's guiding the consequences of behavior. And it's not written laws, and it's not institutionalized authority. It's called natural law by some people. Cory, what can we do to better understand our true relationship with natural law, and how does natural law connect with the real truth about anarchy in your eyes?
Very good question. This term natural law has arisen much in the communities that you and I have taken place in. For example, Mark Passio has a seminar that many people go back and often talk about. In my channel, I often promote it as well. He has a natural law seminar, which is about 6 hours long, and it goes into these concepts that maybe there are these immutable, non-changing, non-man-made, immutable, there's a bunch of words you can use to kind of represent the same thing, unchanging, just universal, always there, basically, not made by man, laws, basically. And even in the scientific sense, the word law means that, it's something that is observable, applies all places, cannot be created by man, but they're rather discoverable. And by aligning our actions to those laws, we are more in harmony per se with the universe, or we are basically learning what we do, what we should do, what we should not do. So when you apply that to the realm of behavior, this could be more specifically said as natural moral law, or the law of reason. Mark Passio even uses several different terms, like kind of tying together consequentialism, the golden rule, moral law, karmic law, the law of attraction, it's basically to say that there's a cause and there's an effect, and you learn what that cause is so you can create a certain effect of your desires, of your wishes. And he even says that natural law can be used for evil in a sense. But that's if you don't really understand what it is, in the sense that you don't really know what your behavior is manifesting. Because if you knew that you were creating a world of evil, you'd probably not want to create it, right? But you might know how to not create a world of evil, and other people may not know, or they do know. So you have to educate them. You have to bring that knowledge forth. And so natural law is more so just the knowledge of our reality that we are attaining, and this evolves with time, which is why this term natural law has varied through the ages. It was even used by the Nazi Party to justify what they were doing. But generally speaking, in the 1700s, 18th century, it specifically referred to an enlightenment of man trying to harmonize with nature in the sense of a strictly moral way, not a racist or purist way, which is to say that there is basically behaviors that are moral or right and behaviors that are wrong. And so Mark Passio says, like, it's crazy I have to teach what is right versus wrong. To him, like, that's absurd. But he sees it as necessary because we are, in many ways, without realizing it, contradicting our own morals. Because most people will say, yeah, I know it's wrong to harm someone, but then they will allow harm to be done and they don't see it. Or they say it's perfectly fine because of a justification or an excuse, a greater good that they then create. And so it's spotting on these types of things, which is why this argument was very common in the 1700s and the 1800s, because they were challenging the monarchy and they were challenging slavery. They wanted to say there's something beyond man, beyond your slave master, beyond the government, that is worth following. And how do we know that? It's because of experience. We don't want to deal with war anymore. We don't want to deal with democide. We don't want to deal with all the problems that are coming from this. And we feel it is very troubling, and that we're ignoring it. And that all these people are living their lives perfectly okay with the fact that this person over here, which they consider to be equal to them, is enslaved and having to do all these things which they wouldn't want to do to themselves. So it breaks the golden rule, but they claim to uphold the golden rule because they're a Christian. So this is just an example, right? The abolitionists are like, well, you're a church, you promote the golden rule, but yet you promote slavery. Like, how could you do that, right? And then the same thing with, like, the monarchy. It's like, well, yeah, we care about you. We're the king, we're the queen, we represent you, but we get to decide what to do with your property. We can come into your home and seize whatever we want. So this is what led to things like the Second Amendment and freedom of speech and all these particular things that some of the founding fathers in America were emphasizing. And then this spread worldwide as many people were realizing, wait, freedom of speech, this is common sense. Like nowadays, if you ask anybody, yeah, do you have freedom of speech? Do you own yourself? Yeah, yeah. Do you have natural rights? Yeah, yeah. They may not be able to define it. They may not be able to discern it as much as I'm talking about right now. But back then, that wasn't even a concept. At least, again, according to our history, we don't see slaves saying, oh, I have natural rights. No, they weren't even allowed to read or write. They weren't even allowed to have knowledge, because even Frederick Douglass said, knowledge makes you unfit to be a slave, and that once you learn to read, you will not be a slave. So why is that? And how come natural law is such a philosophical tradition which is dependent upon reading and writing and observing? And it's really just stressing that mental capacity, which is why it's called the law of reason, your ability essentially to discern, your ability to become conscious or aware. So some people will even say it's just consciousness. I'm okay. I don't really have a strict definition personally when it comes to this term, and because I've observed a lot of these different traditions and the way they've observed it. Like Lysander Spooner has a text on the science of natural law. He never strictly defines it. C.S. Lewis has a compilation of all the ancient origins and basically all their terminology for the natural law, but he never strictly defines it. It's all just to say that there is this morality within the universe that we are discovering. And it's not meant to necessarily be strict and defined. That's what governments do. They say this is the morality. Everybody else needs to follow it. because I say so. I've determined it. I figured it out. And then we realize, there's all these gray areas. Yeah, you can't really do that. And it starts to get very scientific, and it leaves out what I said before, that intuitive spiritual side. So that's why Mark Passio, for instance, will go into the right brain and some of the feminine, yin to the yang aspects that are often shared in occult philosophy circles, or occult sciences, which are basically, sciences or philosophy, psychologies that are kept secret through the generations, or kept from mystery traditions. And there's often, people in power who are often in these types of societies who may want to keep that knowledge away from people on purpose to manipulate them using psychology manipulation, which is mind control, against them. And then, basically you can say it's using the laws of nature against them, because they are just now a beast. They're just succumbing to the laws. They're no longer in control of it. They're no longer, as nature, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, the transcendentalists, would call it, they were not really the masters of nature. So nature was like mastering them. And the word master, in this sense, I mean mastery, right? Because I'm not meaning master as in ruler, as in you have to obey. It's more so you have to master nature, as in you have to, try to learn from it and do your best. But the funny thing is while you're mastering nature, you do have to obey nature as your master, right? Whereas with government, you can try to master the art of government and you have to obey the art of government, but it never seems to work out for humanity.
Right.
And this is why because there's this dual parallel in the psychology where it's like, do I follow truth or do I follow man? Do I follow this artificial constraint of rules versus this rule set that is based on my conscience? It has created this term, natural law versus man-made law.
And, right. And wow. Okay. Firecracker. Yes, yes, and yes. And there was something I wanted to say. Oh, most of the slaves read now. Freddie is rolling in his grave because a lot of the slaves are reading now, but they don't know they don't know certain crucial facts. I believe would pull a whole lot of people over if they really understood them upon first meeting them. Regardless, you're completely right. Authority only appears in certain circumstances. A cop pulls you over. A notice shows up in your mailbox. Somebody enforces some compliance about something when you're out and about. But that's it. Other than that, we have these stories about what and who holds authority. But what does that really mean? It means your life is not constantly governed, it's mostly self governed. And so there's this concept of self governance that aligns more closely with the natural law. And of course, we have government, which is the imposers of man's law, so to speak, today's version of imposing man's law. Whereas there's tribal versions of man's law, there's monarchy versions of man's law, there's republic versions of man's law, there's democracy versions of man's law. Doesn't matter. It's all, like you said, written down, rigid obedience, obedience training mechanisms, right? And we are occasionally interrupted by forces that operate on this false authority with the threat of violence as their only persuasion. Their only persuasion is the threat of violence. So, one of the key questions here is, why don't people clearly see this? And before you answer, I'll give my answer. I think it's because the inner storyteller has been trained incorrectly. From a young age, it's given certain scripts that are repeated and reinforced by not only society as far as how people act, but also popular fiction and the mechanisms that are used by the occult to train the inner storyteller directly, right? Sometimes people will say they're not speaking to you, they're speaking to your subconscious mind, and they're they're doing things manipulative things that you're not aware of when you watch this or you do, this ritual, whatever. So the last piece of this that I'll add is the story that we're learning to give ourselves is that humans are dangerous. Order must be imposed to fend off said danger. Freedom is or leads to the chaos, and authority keeps you safe and less chaotic. So, or false authority. So, even while people are living peacefully every day without force, we have an internal narrative that says this peace only exists because government control is there. And the interesting part that no one's paying attention to is that people don't accept overt force from a king for very long. Control only survives because of the stories that we feed ourselves. So, here's the question to you. Why, in your eyes, can't people see this fact? Also, I think I fixed the echoing. So let me know if that's not true. I'm going to not mute and see what happens.
All right. Yeah, you did fix it. All right. So good job.
Everybody say good host. No.
So I think where we have to start with this is why people have these stories, and I think you hit on it. It's like we've basically been programmed since culture, since a very young age, right, to believe certain things like, do what you're told, always follow authority, whether it's your parent or the school teacher. But then we throw the government in with that. And you also mentioned, we live in a voluntary society for the most part, but then we also throw in an exception. And this is what I mean when I mentioned contradiction in the very beginning. I think people are generally unaware of their contradictions, of the unconscious. Carl Jung talked about it, the collective unconscious. And because of that, there's a lot of trauma and shadow work that you have to navigate. And because of that, I think there's a complexity that makes it very difficult to describe, for everyone where their programming is at. Because I could say people in America are going to be more primed to ideas like what we shared with natural law than, say, someone in China or in North Korea, right, who has no exposure whatsoever, again, to the concept, the idea of natural rights or freedom. And again, that might exist, and it might have an exception where they say, well, yeah, you have natural rights, but there's also these things called political rights. There's also these things called man law. Like, they'll acknowledge it, and then they'll say, well, this is what's there for it. And so then it's about getting clear on like what's the difference, right? What are we actually doing here? And Thomas Aquinas, who is usually known for like the natural law tradition, would do this among like the early church father days. He'd say, here are the natural laws and here are the man-made laws. And man, he would get himself into quite a lot of trouble just suggesting that there's a concept of natural law, even though he promoted man-made law as well. But as that continued, you started to see a lot of people get very rebellious as they realized, yeah, there is this concept of natural law or conscience. And I think you really hit it on the nail. It's like this internal versus external locus of control. If we are more in control of ourselves, self-ownership, or we recognize that we ourselves have a conscience, the ability to discern right versus wrong, then we're sort of invoking this law of reason that we have within ourselves. I mean, it even says in Christian texts that the law is written on your heart. So maybe instead of looking elsewhere, like where's the proof that an anvil is going to fall on someone's head if they steal from someone, right? So this is like the common example people say. Maybe we have to look inside ourselves and say, well, what contradictions do I have? What do I believe? And why do I believe what I believe? Why do all these other people believe what they believe? Where does that come from? And it's a very deeply psychological thing, which is why Mark Passio says natural laws, spiritual laws, why the occult societies call them spiritual laws, scientific laws that can't be measured using science because it's purely physical. So it's basically denoting that there's something deeper within ourselves, again, conscience or soul, empathy, these things that can't be proven by scientific means. And that's going to lead people to a direction where they have definitely a story to share. because they are becoming more human, more creative. And again, this benefits their health tremendously. So when it comes to talking about, let's say, why people promote government, it's because they have a suppression, I would say, of that inner storyteller, that of, or you could say the true story of like, who am I? Know thyself. They're living out someone else's story, or they're just like
Yeah.
a side character. They don't see themselves as someone who has the power to change anything. So
Right.
even if they acknowledge, let's say, natural law is true and I have natural rights, still just say, well, everybody else doesn't see it, so it doesn't make it true. They'll kind of do this is-ought fallacy where they say, well,
Right.
because no one sees it, it's not manifest, right? It's like, oh, because all these people do wrong, that means it's perfectly, it's like, no, not really, right? So and it's not hard to see that contradiction, because it's like, well, then why do you say you want a government? It's to protect people against those who do wrong. Okay, now can you protect someone against someone who is doing wrong to them without being government? And like
Right.
start
Can this
reversing
project
it. Yes.
take shape without the threat of
Right.
violence under the rules?
Yes, can people have protected rights? Can people live free, live voluntarily, without presuming a man-made authority where you give certain people the right to do wrong? And what I mean
What
by that,
boom.
is creating these exceptions, like I said, where you say taxes, even though it's just theft, or you say licenses, even though it's just permission, are justified, and therefore we should steal someone's property, or we should take their property, or we should claim ownership over their property. And we don't use that direct terminology. We use euphemisms.
Right.
We use this mask over our own reality, even though we would acknowledge that it's indeed a mask if we just ask a couple questions.
And let's actually get into some of the word magic right now.
Okay.
So we'll define our terms here. Anarchism, or anarchy, pardon me. Again, it does not mean chaos. It does not mean disorder necessarily. It is not the absence of morality. It is basically self-governance guided by truth, and I'll get into why, freedom without coercion, and responsibility without domination. Definitionally, or etymologically, if I said that right,
Yes.
I had to like spell it in my head. The Greek prefix an and its variant a, like asexual, means not, or without, or the absence of, or lacking. Known as the alpha privative, it is commonly used to negate concepts, not to join them. The Greek word archon means ruler, leader, magistrate. The presence of the participle, pardon me, to be first or to rule. Okay. And to be first means like to be the boss, not to be first in the number line. So anarchon, in English, anarchy, means no rulers, and by way of logic, no slaves. Or no subjects, pardon me, where Mark Passio would change it to no masters, no slaves, which is a little punchier. I like that version better. So that's what anarchy essentially means. And as you pointed out, there's a lot of word magic that goes into the spell that we are under that converts blind obedience into maturity and um, the way things are supposed to be in the stories we tell ourselves about reality. Not in reality, of course. And I know I'm preaching to the choir as far as you, but not to reality. We tell ourselves that the mature, the right way to fight this fight for our freedom is to follow the rules as much as possible while going about figuring out how to end the rulers or end the ruler's reign. Pardon me, no violence intended. Uh, although some of that may have to happen. We don't want to. We don't want to try and do a bloody revolution against all of the banks of the world. We're going to lose. So, how we go about it is a little backwards. And my question here at this point to you, Corey, is why do people resist anarchy even though it is the natural state of affairs?
They resist it because, going back to the previous question, they have programming. But it's more than that. When you finally put things into action, when push comes to shove, people are going to kind of give up in a sense. They're going to be pressured. You're right. It comes down to violence. At the end of the day, uh, nobody views government as violence, but that's what it is. And you said it bluntly, but again, that's beyond euphemism. If you disobey, that's what's going to happen to you. But no one really words it like that. It's like you're a criminal, you're a bad person. It's that they put the shift on you, not on what they are doing. And then what they are doing is masked under the lens of law, which is seen as moral and necessary, and the action is just completely out the door. They're not even looking at what they're actually doing. They're looking at you being a criminal and looking at them as being moral and necessary. So if you try to get rid of the perception, that is overlooking that, and just look at the behavior that is taking place, what is happening is a peaceful person who may have just said, no, I want to, grow food in front of my house. And some person coming up to him and saying, hey, I have this uniform and a badge and a certain title, and so I have the right to take your property and to take you actually and kidnap you and throw you in a cage. But
And if
again,
you resist
that's,
too hard, take your life.
yeah, and take, and again, this is called jail. This is called, all sorts of things, rehabilitation, and people are not healing from these things, and these things are causing all sorts of problems. And in fact, over 80% or more in some cases of crimes in the US are victimless. So they're not even people hurting other people or infringing on anyone's property. So pretty crazy stuff, to think that maybe growing a plant in your house for your own medicinal use could be something that can make someone throw you into a cage.
Hmm.
But nobody's going to be looking at, let's say, that action or that right of that individual throwing in a cage. They're going to be looking at, well, is this person a criminal, or is that plant, illegal or legal? It's like the
Right.
conversation is completely shifted because that other story is like underneath all these other stories. And so they kind of just, look at what comes to the surface, and they live their life day by day. And to some extent, you can't blame people for wanting to just, try to get by, because it's pressuring. It feels like, oh, I'm one person who now has to go against the grain, go against all these people. But here's the reality: is it's the same thing when it comes to like your health. At the end of the day, it's like you either face it now, or later on you're going to face the consequences. You have to take charge. You have to be yourself, and you don't want to end up on your deathbed and say, man, I never took action, I never did what I could. And so many people have those experiences where late in life they realize, man, I never lived my passion, I never lived my story, I never was honest, I did this thing I wasn't supposed to do. I think even, there were news stories about the CIA guy that killed Bob Marley, and he on his deathbed admitted that he did it. It's like he just couldn't keep it for long. He knew, like, this is something that he had to tell people. And how many times do you have whistleblowers come out? But by then it's too late, and no one's going to do anything about it, because someone has to have the courage to speak in that moment. But to have the courage to speak in that moment means you have to have a very strong will, and will has to be trained through facing resistance.
Adversity. Yeah.
Yes, and discernment, which is, you can say, again, the law of reason, natural law, is looking at the world around you and saying what's real, what's not, what's right, what's wrong, and doing that for everything without exception, because you're applying it over all things, including the government, including religion, including everything. So that's why it's so challenging. And that's why the people who come across Mark Pastor's material, or us, and anybody who teaches this subject, um, they start to have an epiphany, and everything starts
Yeah.
to get questioned. Whether,
Everything starts making sense.
yep, it's like they hit the root cause to the problem. Even though, natural law is not, there's only one way of getting there. And I just said there's many other ways to word it. It's the fact that they're taking self ownership, self responsibility. They're able to see their own role, or as you say, like their own story. And I think that is very powerful and it's very healing. And that's why, you know, a lot of people in our community talk about natural medicine. A lot of them are into music, right? You produce music, I produce music. Like almost all of us produce music. What a surprise, because we're expressing our passion. And we say, yeah, you know, it's not up to just Taylor Swift to produce music. It's not up to the, you know, the government to rule our lives. It's like it's not up to the doctor to heal ourselves. Only we live in this body, so let's express it. Let's learn. And you know, hey, maybe I don't want to produce music. Maybe I don't want to do that. Well, voluntarily, I'm going to follow someone else. I'm going to emulate them. I'm going to learn. But you know what? If they're a really good doctor and they're a really good teacher, a really good voluntary governor, you know, they're not going to want to use violence. They're not going to want to force you. They're going to want you to empower yourself. That's the irony of it, is that if you're dependent and you're looking to be a slave, you will be a slave. But if you're looking to be free and you have the courage and you say, I want to be free, then you will manifest it. And so if we have enough people who have that courage just to put the intention out there in the very first place, and then to admit it to others, and just to have that conversation, and to just acknowledge a natural law, or to acknowledge their sovereignty, then the so-called sovereign monarchies out there go out the window, because they call themselves sovereign. But aren't you sovereign?
Right. And, you know, that brings up another word with that Greek prefix, that alpha privative prefix, which is apathy, right? Courage that you're speaking about, that is sustained through facing not only cultural, you know, sort of taboos, but real danger, saying no with real cost, if you will. That courage has to live on the foundation of true care, what Mark Passio calls the generative principle, or the hidden eighth hermetic principle. Um, because true care, it's almost like how gratitude is the amplifier of almost everything good that comes out of your energetic body. True care is that same driving force for right action, for actions that are aligned with that intuitive sort of your string connection on our path to objective goodness as a human family, if you will. Not even goodness, peace, more objective peace in our interactions, more objective, consensual, voluntary interactions that we have. And as as I would put it, you know, looking at my work, The Inner Storyteller, we have these two main stories that make it so that we reject the natural way that things are, which again is anarchy. People reject anarchism not because it doesn't work. They reject it because story number one, we tell ourselves, is you cannot trust anybody. You can't trust people.
Mm-hmm.
And this has always been a lie. There's nobody but people to trust. Okay. And your family does hold a special place. And I think that is divinely structured. But your whole family, your extended family, is just the same thing as regular people. Right. And that's why you have friends that are much closer to you than your extended family most of the time. And then the second story we tell ourselves is freedom is dangerous. And we're given this story from school, popular fiction, non-popular fiction, and just religion, and the way that our worldview is trained through the institutions that are kind of our rulers.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, and all kinds of entertainment reinforce these things, by the way, dear viewers out there. And therefore, we arrive at the conclusion we do indeed need rulers. We arrive at the conclusion human nature is indeed selfish. We arrive at the conclusion that survival is the greatest good, and therefore hedonism is okay to an extent, or something like that. Which, of course, you know, is easily snowballed into actual hedonism, or pleasure seeking past a certain to someone else's detriment. And one of the most one of the most hidden, and I know you're gonna respond to this so well. one of the most hidden ways that we shoot ourselves in the foot in this exact regard is we mistake order following. Okay, we mistake um, occupational duties with moral moral obligation, and in doing so, we become pleasure seeking by way of we get pleasure from appeasing the institutions that keep us in this illusion of there are slaves and masters. Again, the natural state, even though there's real violence in the world, the natural state, we're all equal. There is no actual uh, force in nature that puts someone else above, that puts your peer above you, right? So that there's no real masters and there's no real slaves in existence, never has been, never will be. But with the stories that we tell ourselves that make it real superimposed onto reality, we get pleasure from appeasing the order giver class, which is always a lot smaller than the order follower class. And this is the hedonism that's hidden from our sight, right? We become gluttons for their approval, due, Mark Passio might say, due to our abandonment issues. And I just want to kind of open the floor to you, Mr. Firecracker here, to kind of respond to that whole conglomerate of ideas.
What comes to mind mainly is the idea of a relationship. Basically, we have extended the government as a relationship. And very common throughout the 1800s when it came to slavery, a common defense of the practice was to say, well, it's just like government, it's just like family, it's just like every other relationship in your life. It's just another one of those. It's just part of society. It's the way it's always been. It's the way it will always work. And without it, this and that, who will pick the cotton, who will build the roads, yada, yada, right? But I mentioned that because, okay, if you think about it like a relationship, again, is it a very supportive or nurturing relationship? Is it a toxic relationship? There's a reason why I produced the documentary called Cult World, because looking at the relationship of cults, what they do is they lure you in by saying everything that you want to hear and then comforting you, usually pinpointing on pressure points that you have within your life of, oh, you're suffering, you have this problem, we'll help you, we'll save you, you have community now, you have all this. And then from that, you get so entrenched, involved in it that you don't want to get out. It's like, man, I am I am stuck. There's nothing I can do. And all these other people are part of it too. And this is my reality. And they even said, stay away from your family and isolate yourself. And you do the same thing in your own mind with your own thoughts. I don't want to think about anarchy. I don't want to think about these ideas. Not even thinking about it. That's why I said just to get the idea, the intention out there is huge for most people, because then it will lead them on a path. But if they're unwilling to accept just that starting point of like, I am open, there's a potential relationship I can have with myself or with the universe that goes beyond some institution that just I was born into, then I can see much more. And you do when you start to engage with that relationship, and it's one that can actually nurture you because you see you're a part of it. The government and these cults, it's like they give you the illusion like, I'm a part of it, I have control, I can leave, but you can't. And
I
that's
can
the truth.
vote.
That's right. That's what cults do, is they trick you into thinking that you're in a good circumstance, and everyone who says that you're in a bad circumstance, they're wrong. And they give you the whole playbook. They tell you exactly what to say to them. They tell you exactly how to avoid them. So that way you stay in the cult. But never do they even want you to question the possibility of living without it. It's part of your life. It's literally your extended family. So governments are basically doing this, and this is the biggest cult there is, which is why, even some of the top cult experts are unwilling to question it. And I talk about that in my documentary. Not a surprise. I mean, you would literally have to deal with legal issues. You'd literally have to be no longer a cult expert to talk about the biggest cult, which is ironic, but that's how it works in our world, because that's the number one, that's the main hierarchy that we're dealing with. You can challenge academia, you can leave a college, you can leave your work, and it's still going to be hard. It's going to be hard. It's not easy to do that. But imagine leaving a government. It's the hardest of them all. This is the one backed by violence with the most amount of programming and thousands of years of programming to add on top of that.
And apart from it just being the biggest cult, it has the most supporters.
Yep.
Government has the most supporters of any cult ever, ever, ever.
Great.
ever. And we're getting closer and closer to a one world situation. But we'll leave apocalypse for another episode.
Yes, and see, this is again where cult phenomena comes very closely. Oh, you're sick of all the divisions in the world. You're sick of all these political parties. Well, let's just create a world system,
Right.
where we're all united.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just saying,
I got the perfect idea.
Right. But see, anyone claiming perfection or claiming to know any sort of utopianism or purism should raise a red flag in people's minds.
Yeah.
Because anarchy being reality does not mean it is perfect, and nor does it mean it is bloodshed. It just means it is. That's what nature is. That's what truth is. That's what God is. No one said like God is purely bad or purely good. There's a lot of bad things he does in the Bible. If you're a Christian, you'd be like, yeah, he does. But that's like part of the process. Well, in the same way with the universe, it's like, yeah, you get hurt, you get diseases, you get bruises, like all these things. But guess what? It's in the process of learning. It's all just what is. A kid can get hurt and they stand right back up as if like nothing happened, until a parent comes to them and says, oh, you got hurt? Let me check that out. And then they're like, wait, I should be freaking out over my bruise. And now they start getting in their own head. So this is a big story, right? It's like now the kid is going to be afraid anytime they walk over to an edge or they go too close to water. It's like, oh, well, my parent told me this, but I don't even realize that I'm afraid of it because I was told it at a very young age from my parents. So I don't even know why I'm fearful of it. I don't even know that I have this programming. It's just part of me, and I just assume, oh, well, this is just who I am. Right? So this is why it takes shadow work, because like, wait, I have to go back to my childhood to realize something that I was programmed with, or something someone told me. And if it seems really difficult, like I said, just creating the intention of I want to find my original self. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to be present. I'm going to journal. I'm just going to reflect. Will lead you on that path naturally. The Taoists called it the uncarved block, right? Which is getting to that original slate before it was carved, before it was man-made. And I like to use the word adulterated. As you become an adult, right, you grow up into the world, you become denatured. And funny enough, the word naturalize is used by governments to mean that you're becoming a citizen. But, conversely, you can say to naturalize with nature, consider nature your true church or true, state, then right, you don't need all these middlemen and all these dependencies. And that's where people have been heading. Like, oh, I can print my own Bible. Oh, I could read for myself. Oh, I can think for myself. I mean, these are not like old concepts. These are very new. People have to realize how much progress we've made in civilization just in the past 100 years. And World War II just happened, basically, not even 100 years ago, where insane things happen.
Yeah.
But they were all opposed forces. The funny thing, it's like they were all opposed forces, but they all created bloodshed. So it's like comparing one cult with another cult and saying, well, this cult is better because it's against this cult. It's like, well, that doesn't make the cult true. So in the same sense, when we're using the word anarchy, you could apply it in the sense of I'm rebelling against a system. I'm going to fight it. And now your whole existence is you as the anti-force. But what you're proposing here is a philosophical anarchism that says this is reality. It's not an anti-position. It is just the only position.
It has no opposite.
Yeah, right. It's just the reality, which means that people can make of it however they want. And that's what fears people, is the sense of control. They don't want to have that sense of control because they don't know what it looks like to them in their own mind, even though they live by it every day without realizing it, right? Like you can't not make choices for yourself. You're always making choices for yourself. Now, you might be more conscious of those choices at certain times than other times, but nonetheless, you're still making those choices for yourself. And to say that you're not making those choices is foolish, right?
Right.
Because you do, it's like no one else is taking that action but you. That's what you're
So
doing.
a quick couple last thoughts here, and then you'll respond, and then we'll close them out. Where I'm aiming for an hour and a half
Okay.
is and I'm very, very, very much enjoying myself. Are you enjoying yourself today, Corey?
Yes.
Is
Yes.
this
Thank you.
great? Is this not super cool? Are you not entertained?
That's right.
Couple thoughts. Um, man, I really wanted to say one specific one that's not in my notes. That now I just said that thing and it left my head. But I'll go to this one. um, as we've been pointing out, anarchism is not created. It just simply is, as you said. It's no more it no more needs to be created than the laws of thermodynamics, gravity, magnetism, or the relationship between ions and charges. All of these things just is, and we can do things. We can't manipulate how the law is set, but we can manipulate the matter around it to discover and to explore the depth of these forces. But these forces are built into even the us that would be trying to manipulate shit. It's built into everything. And so it also doesn't need to be enforced. There's no amount of wording, of phrasing, using a certain tone when you speak that makes enforcement of natural law or enforcement of natural forces any more strong than nature is going to enforce it for you. You're not going to be able to talk that into existence. So it doesn't need any enforcement, and it doesn't need to be chosen as a system to live by. It We need to learn and navigate how to treat ourselves in a way that leads us to our shared objectives. Very simple shared objectives like more freedom, more peace, more cooperation, and of course, my so we've talked a lot about my second work that's upcoming, and the again, the pre-order page is done. Go to the link tree, click that link, and check it out. It's called The Inner Storyteller. But my first work, Culture Control, is subtitled Why the Love of Money is Objectively the Root of All Evil. And I go into in that work the magic of contracts, the magic of agreements, and how some of the obedience programming, how some of the inversion of concepts programming occurs in that book. And I kind of, want some of your thoughts regarding how very subtle, inversions are introduced to us that reinforce these things. And then we'll close out the show.
All right.
So what are your initial thoughts on some of the subtle ways that we're like that we're taught to have the wrong idea about voluntarism, anarchism, the natural state of things, the natural state of affairs.
Yeah, so I think we hit on a big one. And by the way, these are mostly based on fear. Some I would say are philosophical points that someone might raise from like Hobbes, saying it's like a state of nature type of scenario, amoral perhaps. And so and by the way, those are all good arguments. I think the philosophical point needs to be considered, especially more often in like the natural law Mark Passio circles. I think just to know how to talk to those folks and those people who think that. But yeah, there's a lot of different standpoints people can come from, but they mostly come from a state of fear where people say that people are relatively evil or bad and we need someone to protect them. So I say the number one thing that people jump onto is well, who's going to protect this person if something happens to them? And it's like, well, what are you going to do is my question to them. Like, are you just going to stand by, let it happen, watch it? What's the answer that you want to see, right? You want to see the government step in, okay, when things happen in seconds and they're there in minutes, and then they have to bring the law into it. And then how are they funded, right? And so then you just go down that chain. It's like, well, okay, they need violence to do the work that they're doing, which is to prevent violence. So you need to guarantee violence in order for the possibility of being protected. Hmm, that's interesting. And then on top of that, you need to create an authority in man in order to do it, by creating badges and uniforms, which again, you can do in a free society, but not if you're creating a right that doesn't exist. In our terminology here, what that means is doing something that is wrong, and saying that it's perfectly right, and saying like it's actually justified, and perfectly necessary. And so again, that would be taxation, that would be permits, that would be licenses. And so a lot of people believe in various things. They'll say, well, I need healthcare, I need, this type of service from the government, and without which, oh my gosh, I wouldn't survive. And so again, the question is, well, how are you getting that service, right? And is that really the best way that you could receive that service? Could that service be made better? Right. So these are the types of things that I would do on an individual case basis, asking people questions. And I would encourage people to kind of ask themselves questions. So if someone has a concern, and maybe they're going to write in the comment section of this video and they say, well, what about this? What about that? I would encourage someone does that to themselves first in their own journal and see where it leads them up. Right. See if you can find any material out there, actually, like by Gustav D. Molinari, where he describes in his book how a free society would work, with private defense and private police, or basically multiple different police stations, not one centralized police force, showing that actually it can work better. Austrian economics, right? And the abolitionists in their works, and the Taoists in their works, and Etienne de la Boétie from France in the 1400s, and I mean, there's Lysander Spooner being a lawyer who didn't really fit in with the abolitionists, but and even had disagreements with them on some major things, but yet still, arguing that the Constitution is, you never gave consent to it, right? And that you never gave consent to the systems you live under. And he proved that from a legal perspective and a moral natural law perspective. I think people can become familiar with this if they want to really go down the philosophical route. But I would encourage that people just go into the natural, like, human route. Like, you don't need to read philosophy. You don't need to read every single book. Just ask yourself in your heart, do the systems look human to you? Do they look natural? Are what they're doing, natural and human? Or is it all just one big show, one big game that you have kind of just been playing into? Do you like seeing all the people fight over who's right and who's wrong when it comes to politics? Why aren't people talking about right versus wrong action? Like we're doing here. Why
Right.
is that not considered? But instead, we have to decide, well, the best way to rule and control someone else. But we never question if they should be controlled in the first place. They talk about all sorts of things, these people in power and the people that follow them, as though we can be the gods over our fellow men and women and men. And we don't ever question if we should not do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what we have to do, is we have to go back to that very fundamental root. And that is like, what is our original reality? If we're claiming that anarchy is that original reality, then we should find it. No matter what position, no matter where we live on this earth, no matter if you read a philosophical text or not, you should be able to find it if it's there. And you won't even need to hear it from us. Like, just start thinking for yourself and say, how can I get as much beyond the concepts I have been trained to believe as much as possible? So that
Yeah.
includes money, that includes time, that includes government, that includes maybe religion, that includes maybe some of the foods that you think are necessary. It includes so many things that you just have been training yourself to believe over time. Even the way you sit, your posture, your everything. I swear. I mean, you can start going down the list, and it's not that you should, like, you don't have to question everything, but the more aware you are of your environment, the more you're going to say, like I said before, have control over what happens with your
Hmm.
own life.
You know, I'd say impulsively here, if you're just if you're at the very beginning of awakening, you probably should question everything for a while. To question everything, question your own
Yes.
biology, like question everything for a while, and then yeah, allow common sense to develop in a new, more open inner
Right.
space.
If we don't want to push an agenda, if we don't want to promote a cult, if we don't want to say, this is a utopian vision, this is
Right, right.
the purest vision, then we would allow an individual to come to this conclusion on their own.
On their own terms. Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Some questions, dear viewers, that may get you there. That you should, ponder or write down or ask somebody in a street interview like Cory. Why do people trust man, man's authority more than their own inner voice? Why do we trust authority more than our own inner voice? Second question. Why does freedom feel unsafe to so many people? It's a very, very deep question. Why does freedom feel unsafe to so many people? And I'm not asking about freedom to a 15-year-old that's like still developing and got hormone shifts out the wazoo. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about freedom for real freedom. Okay. Um, and the last, third, just as powerful question that I want to leave you viewers with: what happens when someone actually starts living without waiting for permission to live? You can interpret living and live how you please. You are already free, dear viewers. You are already free, and it's more than you realize. Embrace that more and more each day. And perhaps it'll be a nice big drop in the bucket of, toward our shared objectives. Um, Cory, Cory Endrulat, tap link.cc/Cory Health. Um, where can people connect with you? I have in the description your YouTube channel where they can subscribe to your YouTube channel. Definitely check that out. He has all types of content. Check it out, check it out, check it out, check it out, check it out. Share it. Go like it. Click his notification bell. Okay. He takes random hiatuses from posting, but when he comes back, it's better than ever. Where can people connect with you, bro?
Thank you. Bigfootflorida.com is where I'm going to be sending a lot of people for now on, since that is the nonprofit I created. And if anybody wants to plant any trees or do any certain land experiments, see what we're doing on all fronts, order a food forest design, you know, get their kids out of the current public school system, or they're interested in looking at various options, it's all there. And a lot of these projects are developing. I have, like I said, a 5-acre project, Bigfoot Food Forest. And let me tell you, just by, again, setting that intention and having this conversation right now, and nobody jumping to the comments with an assumption or with even their question, but letting that question sit with themselves, and then utilizing the resources at their fingertips, the AI and the search engines, let yourself absorb into different perspectives, you are already demonstrating freedom. You're already living voluntarism. It's that simple. People want to know, where's the proof for voluntarism? It's right here. No one's coercing this interaction right now. And
Right.
I go to farmers markets, I go to churches, I go to all these places, and they're all voluntary, and they have complex organization, and people get so much done. In fact, these nonprofits are doing a lot of the work that the governments probably should be doing, and they're doing it often with volunteers not even being paid, or pure donations, which is wild to think of. So that just shows you how charitable, how amazing human beings can be. And that's not even considering the fact that, money can enter the equation and get things done. I mean, look at Walmart and how much influence that they have as a corporation. Now,
Right.
love them or hate them, but like they have the power of like a government,
Right.
more than one, if anything,
Right.
with the amount of income and GDP or whatever that they have. It's insane, and how they actually challenge the current systems that be when they create, let's say, over the counter medications. Instead of having to go to your doctor, having to go to some centralized source, now you can go to a store, and there's other ways of doing things. And you'd be surprised if you see that Domino's and certain chains actually pay for building roads. Like, you'll find out everything you need to find out. You don't need to hear it from me. You don't need to depend upon watching my content. It's just a matter of if you're willing to do it. And again, you training your will and you doing this very exploration is the freedom that you seek.
100%.
So there you have it.
100%. You already are the change you seek. Thank you so very much for coming to the show. Y'all, y'all know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe, notifications, share this out, share other content creators that are like-minded. Peace and love. Awaken your mind. He or she's been in the comments the whole time. Much love to you. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see y'all in the next one.
Peace. Peace out.